Mezuzah. You may have noticed many doorposts have a scroll on the doorpost. And you are not really sure, what is that scroll? How come we see it on some doorposts? How come they're on other doorposts? And some do have, some don't have. Some have it at every single doorpost. What is the story about the Mezuzah? So I want to share with you some insights that perhaps could help you understand what Mezuzah is all about, and perhaps you would consider obtaining your own Mezuzah for your own home or workplace. By the end of today's presentation, I hope that you will be inspired to accept upon yourself this incredible traditional gift from God that goes back 3,000 years. A gift that keeps on giving. So let's start from the beginning. If you remember the story of Passover, when the Jews were enslaved for 210 years, and then Moses came and instructed them how they will be leaving this bondage. Moses approached Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go," and the whole story of Passover, the 10 plagues, etc. The final plague was the one that eventually Pharaoh allowed the Jews to leave Egypt. And to that Moses explained to the Jewish people that you were to prepare for yourself a lamb, put it at your home, at your bedside, and on a certain day, on the 14th day, you will be instructed to slaughter this lamb and bring it out as a sacrifice to God, the creator of heavens and earth. And then Moses explained to them, take from the blood of this sacrifice and put it on the doorposts of your home, so that the angel of death, as it arrives to smite the firstborns of your oppressors, will pass over your doorposts. And that is where the name Passover comes from, and that is where the doorpost concept comes from, the blood on the doorpost. So that is the very first mention in the Bible, in the Torah, about your doorpost. Then later on in the Torah, in the most holiest prayer that we recite morning and evenings, it's called the Shema prayer. And in this prayer, we express the oneness of God. We express how much we understand that there's only one God. And the words are Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, God our God, God is one. That is the declaration of the Jewish people, that there's only one God, the creator of heavens and earth. And that is the God that is to us like a father. We are to him like a child. We talk to each other as children talks to the Father. So in this prayer, we express our love to each other. And in that very paragraph that we express our love, there's an instruction God tells us. I want you to write a scroll and place this scroll on your doorpost. Now that is a commandment that is fulfilled every single generation from when the Torah was given on Mount Sinai. The mezuzah actually means a doorpost. So the scroll that goes on the doorpost is also called a mezuzah, albeit the mezuzah is actually the doorpost. So the doorpost is where you enter into your home. The words of the Bible is to put it on your homes and your gates. So therefore, when you have a home that has a doorpost, so on the right side, where the door opens up, you put your mezuzah. And when you affix the mezuzah to your doorpost, you say a blessing. By doing that, you are welcoming God's protection. You are welcoming God's presence into your home. What better way than when you come home from the hustle bustle, from the busyness of your day, and you look at your doorpost and you see a scroll with God's name on it, that God told you in our love affair with man to God, you take a scroll, you put it on your doorpost, and I will be there. Now, what considers a kosher mezuzah? A kosher mezuzah is a piece of parchment that was written by a skilled, religious, observant scribe who has learnt the skill of writing the biblical words of this paragraph of the Shema, the way it's prescribed to be done in a mezuzah. And when this mezuzah is written with a quill, with special kosher ink, each letter needs to be individual. If two letters are touching each other, the mezuzah would not be considered kosher, valid. Or if a letter is cracked, then it's not complete. It wouldn't be an effective mezuzah. The mezuzah needs to be precise and to be exactly the way God told us He wants it to be. And that is written by an observant, skilled scribe. Once this mezuzah is written on a piece of pure parchment, not paper, not any other material, it needs to be pure parchment from the hide of an animal. Once it is written to its skillful regulations, and it needs to be on a very straight line. And if you have a chance to actually look at a mezuzah, you'll be impressed of the details that it takes to make a kosher mezuzah. Then the mezuzah is rolled up and put into a case and put on the doorpost. Many people mistakenly think that the metal case, the glass case, the plastic case is what a mezuzah is. It is not. It's what's inside the case. That's what counts. The commandment is to have the mezuzah at every single door frame in your house, except the bathrooms. In other words, ideally, it's to have it at every single doorpost. Sometimes people just have it at the front or the back or the bedroom or the kids' bedrooms. Ideally, it's to have the mezuzah at every single one of your doorposts. Let me share with you why mezuzah is actually near and dear to me personally. When I was about 12 years old, that was in 1973. It was my first exposure to terror in Israel. There was a city in northern Israel called Ma'alot. And I was listening to the radio. And my father, may he rest in peace, was listening to the radio, and I was there. And I heard the live report from Jay Brzezinski, I believe was the reporter, who was reporting live on the scene of what was unfolding. What happened was a group of terrorists took siege of a high school in the city Ma'alot. And they took the students as hostages. And the Israeli army went on a daring mission to rescue the hostages. I remember as a very impressionable 12-year-old listening as it's unfolding. I'm hearing the gunshots, I'm hearing the screaming, I'm hearing the prayers. Someone was praying the words from Genesis, "May the angel protect the children." Sadly, there were some fatalities amongst the high school students, but many were rescued. After this terrible event, my Rabbi Schneerson, the world Jewish leader, dispatched some of his students who was living in northern Israel and suggested that they go to the high school and they check the mezuzot that are on the rooms where these children were, and to see if those mezuzot were still valid, were they still kosher, or have they deteriorated, have they dried up. And an interesting finding happened, that the rooms that the children were fatally killed, their mezuzah were not kosher. There is something wrong. Either the case was empty, or the mezuzah itself was invalid. Thus, the world Jewish leader, Rabbi Schneerson, launched a worldwide campaign of awareness that everyone should check their current mezuzot that they have to see if it is still valid. Because many of times when we purchase a mezuzah, we put it on our doorpost and we set it and forget it, and we forget about it. We didn't even think twice that sometimes they become invalid. Sometimes they dry up. Sometimes the sun bakes on them and actually burns the parchment. Thus, the door no longer has a mezuzah on it. This was in 1973 when the Mezuzah campaign was launched. And throughout the world, millions of mezuzahs were found to be invalid and needed to be replaced. Until this very day, one checks their mezuzot at least every 3.5 years to make sure. Now, why is that? What is so important about having that kosher mezuzah on your doorpost? When you look at a mezuzah, there are 3 Hebrew letters on it. The letter Shin, Daled, and Yisroel, and a Yud, which is God's name. The acronym is Shomer Daltot Yisrael, the guardian of the doors of Israel. Yes, a mezuzah is your protection. It's your protection when you're home and when you leave your home. And we need protection. We need God's protection with us from the minute we rise till we go to sleep. And here God is giving us something physical, something materialistically that we can connect with. As a matter of fact, when I leave my house every day, I touch the mezuzah and I kiss it. It's my connection to God and saying, God, I'm leaving home now. I'm getting on the road. Please protect me. When I come back, I put my hand on the mezuzah. I say, thank you, God, for letting me come home. I put mezuzahs on our children's bedrooms. How comforting it is for the child to touch the mezuzah before they go to sleep and say, good night, God. That intrinsic, beautiful connection between a young child and God. The other night, my granddaughter was going to sleep. And I was observing how my daughter On the way to her crib, the daughter touched the mezuzah and gave it a kiss. And I was standing and watching and saying how beautiful this is. For 3,000 years, the Jewish people were taught how to be protected with the mezuzah. Let me share with you another thought about the mezuzah on your doorpost. Those words, Shin, Daled, Yud, those are 3 Hebrew letters, is one of God's names. It's called Shaddai. Shaddai is one of God's names. God has many names. Many names. These are one of them. It's interesting to note why from all of God's names is the word Shin, Daled, Yud, Shaddai on the mezuzah. Great commentator on the Torah, his name is Rashi. He wrote that the name Shaddai represents Mi She'omar Dai. Dai in Hebrew means enough. The one that said enough. Who said enough? Well, when God created the heavens and the earth, when He created the oceans, the world is full of water. Then God separated the water from the dry land. And God said, enough, stop. Stop by the dry land. Let this place be for people to inhabit. Let this dry land be dry land where people can live. So God thus said, stop to the water, to the forces of water. When the winds were created, the ferocious, powerful winds, God said, die, stop, slow down, slow down. You can't blow so powerful, hurricanes, tornadoes, and cyclones. You need to be able to allow people to live. And thus the wind has retracted itself so that it can allow people to live. So that is the concept that God was the one who said, stop. God had the power to know when to say stop and how to stop. Well, when we come home to our beautiful family after an amazing day at work, we too have that ability to touch the mezuzah and say stop, die. Whatever occurred in the day, whatever hustle bustle, whatever craziness that happened out in the workplace, it stops here. I will not bring it into my house. What's happening outside in the world stays outside. My house will be a sanctuary. My house will be a home of tranquility, of peace and love and happiness. When you touch that mezuzah, you have the power that God has to say stop. Leave the troubles behind you. Leave your headaches behind you. Leave your business dealings behind you. Leave the headaches, the trouble, the stress. Leave it behind you. Do not bring it into your house. That is what a mezuzah reminds us. It reminds us that there's outside and there's inside. And you are the owner of your house. You and your wife are the rulers of the house. That you decide what comes in the house and what doesn't. Keeping the filth, the dirt, the language, the street language outside the house. We don't allow that in the house because this is a house of God. If you notice a mezuzah, when a doorpost is wide enough, it's always crooked. It's always tilted. Why is that? Why is a mezuzah always tilted? Another beautiful lesson in life. Some sages were of the opinion that a mezuzah should be horizontal. Others say no, it should be vertical. And they both had very good reasons. But you know what the Torah teaches us? Compromise. You are both right. It should be vertical and should be horizontal. You both have very compelling reasons. But reality, we need to learn the art of compromise. So when we come home, we look at the mezuzah and we see the mezuzah is tilted. It reminds us to compromise. That is a secret ingredient in keeping a healthy marriage, a healthy household, healthy relationships. It's not just waiting for the other person to compromise, but you compromise yourself. Be the one to initiate to compromise. There was once a family who took a trip to Israel. They were building a beautiful 10,000 square feet home with 45 doorposts in their home. And they're in Israel during the tour, and the tour guide was talking to them about the great mitzvah of having a mezuzah. He was so inspired. He purchased 45 beautiful mezuzahs. Now, a real good mezuzah, average cost starts at $50, $75. A real good mezuzah could go up to $300. He did not spare any expenses, but to buy from the finest mezuzahs. He bought 45 of the most expensive mezuzahs. And he had them all put into their cases, and he shipped them off to his home, to the contractor, and he gave the contractor exact instructions how to place the mezuzah on the doorposts, and made sure he knows not to put them on the laundry, on the bathrooms doorposts. He's so excited. What an investment. I'm going to welcome God into our house. We're going to have 45 beautiful mezuzahs. He finishes his trip in Israel. He comes back home and he meets his contractor, looks at the beautiful house, and he sees the mezuzahs are hanging exactly perfectly where they're supposed to be. And he looks at the contractor, he says, "Wow, you did such a beautiful job. The house is so beautiful. And I want to thank you so much for putting up those mezuzahs for me." He says, it wasn't a problem. I got them when you sent them to Israel. But as soon as I got them, I looked inside them. I saw the instructions. So I figured you told me already what to do. So I threw out all those instructions. Which means he threw out all those $300 parchments that the contractor thought they were instructions. This was a story that's been told over and over again, that we realize and understand what's in the mezuzah is not just a piece of paper. It's not instructions. It's holiness. It's a part of the Torah. It's what connected heaven and earth. It's what welcomes God into your house. That is what a mezuzah is. A mezuzah is a protection, not just in your home, but when you come and when you go. Some people even keep a mezuzah in their car. Some people keep mezuzahs at their workplace. And having a mezuzah with you. The Rebbe once gave an example. It's like a soldier who goes out to war, who wears a helmet. The helmet protects you from what's coming your way. A kosher mezuzah is connected to your soul, connected to your whole being. Let me conclude with a story I heard many years ago from a rabbi, Meir Greenberg, from New Jersey. He was contacted by one of his congregants that something happened with their teenage daughter, that she decided to go astray from Judaism and become an idol worshiper. And the parents were so beside themselves. How could their daughter do this? So the rabbi said, I'm going to pen a letter to the world-renowned Rabbi Schneerson, and we're going to tell him your daughter's story and ask him for a blessing and for advice. So the father pens a 5-page letter, sends it off to Brooklyn, New York, to the Rebbe's office. The Rebbe receives the letter. Short while later, Rabbi Greenberg gets a call from the Rebbe's office, says, there's an answer from the Rebbe for this congregant of yours. The Rebbe recommends that you check the mezuzah on their home. Make sure that the mezuzahs are kosher and properly placed. The rabbi calls up and makes an appointment, comes down to the house and talks to the father, and the father says, hey, I recently bought new mezuzahs. We have all beautiful mezuzahs in our home. They're all kosher, they're fresh, they're kosher. We had them checked. Rabbi Greenberg says, if the Rebbe says to check him, then you ought to check him. Again, he says, but I just did them. He said, all of them? He says, I took all the mezuzahs down from our house. And he says, every single one? Did you make sure you got every single one? And he remembered himself. He remembered that in the basement, there's one door that he actually forgot to check that mezuzah. That is actually the door that the daughter would oftenly leave the house from, as she has distanced herself from her parents. So Rabbi Greenberg goes down with him, and they take the mezuzah off the doorpost. And Rabbi Greenberg begins reading the word, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. He sees that the last word, which should read Echad, which means one, actually the last letter is instead of a letter Dalid, like a D, it's like a R, like a Resh, which means, hear, O Israel, God, our God, God is another God. That one letter changes a Hebrew word from one to another, which means that this girl began seeking another God. What happened was the mezuzah that she was going out of was not kosher, represented another God, and that affected her spiritual being. When I heard this story, I appreciated how synchronized we are with the mezuzah on our doorposts. Many of times when people are suffering illnesses, tragedies, calamities, the instruction always is, check your mezuzah. Something's wrong. You gotta check, see how synchronized, how connected are you with God? How is God protecting your needs? That is the importance of checking your mezuzah. That is the power of mezuzah. The power that it synchronizes with your soul. As you walk by it every day, your soul and the mezuzah gets connected. And it empowers your soul to be protected, both body and soul. As King David writes in Psalm 121, well, God will protect you, you're coming and you're going. Make it a priority. Find your local observant Torah scribe and purchase a kosher certified mezuzah. I don't recommend you buying it online. Just like you wouldn't buy a very valuable diamond blindly, but you'd rather go to a jeweler that you trust. This is your life. Trust a scribe that's going to write a mezuzah, sell you a mezuzah that is valid and kosher, because it is your life depending on it. A kosher mezuzah is the most secured home and secured life. So let's all check our mezuzahs if they haven't been checked in a while, or purchase a mezuzah And I guarantee you, I promise you, God will protect you. God will guide you. God's countenance will shine upon you and your whole family forever. God bless you. God loves you.